ready for battle.
Serious Sam has always been an interesting series, even if only a game. The idea of parodying a game market was odd enough already, but the success spreading to several sequels and indie games makes it an amazing entity to follow. Its aspects of simple yet ridiculous difficulty combined with satisfying gunplay took the world by storm. I never really got into the first-person shooter genre until I tried Serious Sam, so I figure an analysis of what exactly makes the game so enjoyable would be something interesting to see. Since the Sam series is not exactly plot-driven, there won't be any spoilers in this video, but the topics will primarily be focused around gameplay and various design elements across the series. The indie spin-offs will not be covered, mainly because they're entirely different creatures and didn't leave a lasting impact on me. For those of you that fell asleep in history class, Serious Sam started out as an indie game made by Crow Team. After 2 mediocre sports games, these Croatian goofballs developed their own game engine and decided to roll the dice on something different. Serious Sam was an attempt to parody the first-person shooter industry at the time and reduce the genre down to its base elements: guns, killing, and secrets. In Serious Sam the first encounter you had a lot of guns, a lot of enemies, and secrets generally killed you outright. This may sound miserable on paper, but Crow Team built the game in a way that just felt good to play. It felt so good that soon after, the first encounter got an expansion that made the gameplay much better, with more variety in guns alongside more mechanics to play with. From there, Sam's popularity took off like a rocket. Each sequential game would experiment with the series in various ways, tinkering with new mechanics and designs in order to keep the Sam franchise alive. Now that we got general cliff notes out of the way, let's get into some serious discussion. Serious Sam, the first and second encounters, the forerunners of the series.
Here comes trouble.
Released in 2001 and 2002, these games reinforced the idea of what made early first-person shooters great. The first encounter starts you off as Sam Stone, appearing in ancient Egypt with nothing more than a Bowie knife and a 6-shooter. From there, you have to wade through a gross amount of alien soldiers, biomechanoids, and zombie raptor cows in order to get a cornucopia of weaponry to beat the game. The core idea of Serious Sam is centered around combat, where enemies descend upon you en masse, and as the player, you need to manage correct weapon usage and proper evasion in order to survive. Sam also does things that people wouldn't expect from a first-person shooter. Secrets are often punished by a variety of enemies popping in to kill you. Areas are wide open and allow for maneuverability to fight enemies that are far faster than you, and ammo's plentiful but still limited in each fight to create tension. The game also feels really well designed. Guns are satisfying to shoot, enemies are chunky, and the music is so hard rock that it complements the mindless action so well. A year after the release of the first encounter, the second encounter would be released, increasing the satisfaction of the game tenfold. With new levels, new mechanics, more bosses, and more enemy variety, the second encounter brought so much to the table that it's often labeled the must-play of the series, and with good reason. The second encounter effectively polished Serious Sam to a mere shine. However, there are some design elements that I didn't like. For one, advancing through each set of levels would reset your guns, which makes some sense, but the areas are so short that once you get the cannon or laser, it's suddenly gone and you're back to your basic guns. Another thing I didn't enjoy was that the sniper rifle in the second encounter just felt so unsatisfying to use, yet many early levels are designed around that gun. I have some other minor complaints, such as overly open areas or some gimmicky first-person platforming, but those complaints are basically nitpicking at this point in the argument. Crow Team knew exactly what they wanted to do with the first Serious Sam, and it shows in the game's design. Everything about both the first encounter and the second encounter's engine and design choices come together in order to make a fast-paced and satisfying action experience. Though the game initially existed as a parody, it's so well designed that it transcended that image and became something truly unique and satisfying to play. Its rampant popularity is certainly well founded even by today's gaming standards. The first and second encounters are truly what we call Serious Sam. Next up we have the black sheep of the series, Serious Sam 2. Released in 2005 for the consoles and the PC, we can already see a stark change in visual design. Rather than the semi-realistic visual design, we now have a cel-shaded cartoony look to the game, which is reflected in both general presentation alongside weapon and enemy design. The game's mechanics were also retooled somewhat for the console release. Rather than a save system, we now have lives to work with that respawn us to a rough average of what is needed in a level. To compensate, overhealing that would normally be done through specific items in the first game is now done by every healing and armor pickup as well. Vehicle segments are also a big focus of the game, with a wide array of mountable turrets and vehicles at your disposal for whatever cartoony murder you may desire. To summarize, if the first games were what we call Serious Sam, then Sam 2 would be called Silly Sam. Now, while many people may be turned off by what I just said, I personally found Serious Sam 2 to be an enjoyable game in its own right. Crow Team clearly wanted to try something new with the series, and there were many changes that I actually enjoyed seeing. For one, the visual variety was something I longed for in both the first and second encounters. A lot of the enemies in the second encounter make note that Mental was taking ideas from Earth media in order to bolster his forces. And in Silly Sam, this idea was brought out in spades. There are far more enemy designs in this game, which keeps the game fresh and exciting despite being a tad racist at times. Guns are still satisfying to use but feel a lot more distinctive and interesting than the first Sam games. Levels are still designed around accommodating mob combat, but areas are slightly more constrained, which makes things more threatening but not cramped. There's also actual color in the game, and not so much that it feels like a unicorn barfed in my eyes. Overall, the transition from the encounter games to Silly Sam feels quite refreshing. Many people don't enjoy the game because it felt too over the top, but Serious Sam was always about being over the top and nuts, so this transition to a more cartoony motif doesn't bother me in the least. I wouldn't mind seeing more Silly Sam, to be honest. Serious Sam 2 doesn't get off scot-free though. There are many design choices in gameplay and visuals that are somewhat jarring. The live system really irritated me because it's a limited play system built into a game that's known for outright killing you for picking up a hidden case of shotgun shells. Not only does the lives model clash with the gameplay tenets of Sam, it's also completely redundant. Serious Sam 2 still has a save system in the PC version, and you can save anytime and anywhere with no repercussions. You might be wondering, why does this live system exist then? And the reason is due to the console ports not having the save system, but instead relying on checkpoints. Not only does the checkpoint system put players in a corner easier, the console ports actively make things unfairly harder for a player base that has no experience with the games before. Outside of the live system, Serious Sam 2 also feels way too safe. Sam can pretty much outrun any non-boss threat with no effort or risk, including the mobs of Clear that were notorious for mowing you down in cold blood. Since every healing item can now overheal you to 200 HP, you don't feel obligated to find the health secrets to stay alive since all those spare 50 HP heals can now add up to a full heal. There's also multiple gondola segments that force you in a small area while still fighting large mobs, and this felt like a huge betrayal to the Sam game model in its own right. Serious Sam 2 certainly earned its reputation as the black sheep of the series, but that doesn't make it bad. Crow Team took a huge risk with the changes with this game, and while it didn't pay off in the checkbooks, I still found it charming and entertaining in its own right. It takes balls of steel to experiment with a game engine that's generally heralded as a great success, and while the experiment was somewhat of a mess, I still found gleams of entertainment and great design choices with what came from Serious Sam 2. It's really not that bad, man. Finally, we have the latest installation of the game series, Serious Sam Before First Encounter.
Put a sock in it.
Released in 2011 across the modern gaming spectrum, we have our first actual HD Sam game outside of the Encounter remakes. BFE takes place in the rampant battles across Egypt in the present day during Mental's war campaign against Earth. BFE also tries to ride the coattails of its predecessor through actively mocking the current gaming industry. Game mechanics are reverted back to the gold standard that the Encounter series first established, but with some slight mechanical additions to streamline the experience. Given the atmosphere of the game, things also feel a bit more down to earth in terms of visual design. So how does the gameplay compare to the gold standard of the encounter games? I'd say it's alright. Crow Team still holds to their tenets of having very grisly and cathartic combat, with guns being mostly satisfying and enemy deaths being as grisly as ever. Level designs are interesting in that they're far more claustrophobic, but we have far more vertical and tactical freedom in the map compared to the past games in their wide open territories. Gun variety feels far more pronounced in terms of mechanics, especially with things such as the shotguns and rockets versus grenade launchers. The presentation is far more cinematic, yet still retains the gameplay during these admittedly awesome looking moments. It's certainly serviceable. It feels like the SAM experience we've come to expect out of Crow Team. Now I bet that you viewers found my last statement somewhat shallow and empty. That's because I really couldn't find much to enjoy from BFE, and didn't exactly enjoy the direction they took the game in. The game was touted as a jab at how modern shooters are so flimsy and homogenous and how BFE would break the mold again, but Crow Team got so full of themselves that BFE became the very game they were actively mocking. The biggest culprit of this is the inclusion of hit scan enemies. For those of you not in the know, the concept of hit scan is the idea that if you are in the line of fire of a weapon, you will be hit, much like a railgun. All the SAM games before this had very little, if any, hit scan enemies. And evasion felt very skill-based since you could dodge the incoming wave of 50 rockets and various lasers with relative ease, if you were good. BFE, however, litters mobs with hit scan enemies. Between the basic zombies, Apache helicopters, both models of the Scorpion Gunner, and technically the Matriarch, you always seem to be getting hit and slowly losing your life in a miserable fashion. This in turn leads to taking cover, which is the primary thing this game advertised it wouldn't do. I shouldn't be so angry about this, but every level has mobs of these damnable creatures that make certain clever level designs worthless when you could get shot at any time and lose a huge chunk of your health simply by being seen. Aside from that, level design just feels shallow overall, with the first half of the game feeling exactly like a modern warfare shooter in both cutscene and level design. Meanwhile, the second half of the game felt like Crow Team realized they hadn't made anything like Serious Sam, yet instead of scuttling the project and starting from scratch, they just tack on certain level designs that are strikingly similar to the first encounter. Enemy design also feels really weak. Not only do we lose several decapitated soldiers for these half-assed zombie designs, we literally get the fat gun-arm demons from Doom 2 as well. The visual design of the game is gaudy, with dumb stuff like blood and ichor overlays on your screen to guns looking like Nerf toys and Sam's giant man hands. Everything in the environments looks so god-awful brown and generic, even during some of the sci-fi bits they muscle into the game. Finally, Sam himself just seems like an unrivaled douche in this game. In past games he was kind of an asshole, but at least he had great energy and charisma, which led to great one-liners after tough fights and humorous dialogues with other enemies. In BFE he just seems so smug without any of the energy the past Sams had, which leads to him being completely unlikable despite being this ultimate badass that everyone should like. Playing this game really stung deep when I realized what was happening. The big question, however, is what exactly happened to this game? The answer is surprisingly simple. Crow Team was actually working on a tactical shooter of their own, but the project lost steam quickly and was eventually scrapped. Later in the years, Crow Team would make the Serious Engine 3, and they realized they haven't got any content to show off with it, so they opted to make a new SAM game. In order to expedite the process, they recycled many of the assets from their old tactical shooter and brought it into BFE. This is why you see so many uncharacteristic things in BFE, such as Apache helicopters, tactical guns, and those loathsome zombies. The irony of them using cover shooter resources in a game that was actively bashing cover shooters never really sat well with me. It left a bad impression of Crow Team and BFE on me, despite their past track record. Serious Sam BFE was like watching an old movie star trying to be relevant again. Crow Team really wanted to show off their new engine and make a new Sam game, but the various decisions they made combined with their own hubris really shot themselves in the foot. Many people bash Sam 2 for being a betrayal of the series, but I found so much more wrong with BFE that I had a hard time believing that it was the new Sam game. Continuing the weird nickname motif I had going, Sam BFE felt more like subpar Sam to me. A lame-ass cash-in that should have probably been left on the drawing board for a couple more months. The Serious Sam series overall has had a turbulent lifespan, and with Serious Sam 4 being teased at, things are about to get even crazier. I really hope Crow Team tries to actually experiment with the series again like they did with Sam 2, but still keep the core tenets from the Encounter games that fans came to love and enjoy. As it stands, however, we can only hope that Crow Team has learned their lesson from BFE and doesn't make the same mistakes again. So until the next game, keep a shotgun close, and remember to stay serious.